Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on 20 cable stations from Vermont to New York City and 24/7 on the internet at thestruggle.org. We start our program with part of a talk by an activist who went to Honduras to get a first-hand look about the coup that overthrew the president of that country and to see the daily resistance on the part of the Honduran people. He's Sean Joseph, and he gave a talk in August at Connecticut United for Peace. Then to New Haven, Connecticut, where in early September, the state's AFL-CIO met in convention. The featured speaker was John Wilhelm, the national president of Unite Here. Wilhelm's union and the SEIU broke away from the AFL-CIO several years ago, launched an independent group called Change to Win. But now Wilhelm and president of the SEIU, Andy Stern, are on the outs. And it looks like Unite Here will be back in the AFL-CIO. Wilhelm spoke about this at the convention and had some excellent remarks on the subject of immigration. I'll tell you more about union news at the convention, including an effort by some unionists to get the union to sell off its Israel bonds. Sean Joseph is from Providence, Rhode Island, and went down to Honduras in early August.
So as folks know, on June 28th, there was a coup executed by the armed forces of Honduras against the elected president, Manuel Zelaya, who was taken to Costa Rica. According to the coup makers, and the coup makers line is more or less what you get in the U.S. press, according to the coup makers, the coup was in defense of the Honduran Constitution. The Constitution, Article 239, bars the president from running for re-election, and it was claimed that Zelaya was trying to run an illegal referendum in order to take that away and allow him to run for re-election in November. And this is something which is actually completely false. Zelaya was trying to hold a non-binding national survey on whether the November ballot should include a referendum on whether there should be a constituent assembly to consider constitutional reform in the future. So it's actually a number of steps away from any possible kind of constitutional reform. And this power to conduct non-binding national referenda is a power granted to the president under the Citizen Participation Law of 2006, which was passed by the Congress and all that kind of stuff. So Zelaya couldn't have run for re-election regardless of the results of this survey. So in fact, the main sort of legal justification that the golpistas or the coup makers give for executing the coup is actually a sham. And it's really a sham that's for an international audience because every political person in Honduras would actually have an entirely clear idea of what was being proposed and what was happening. So it was really about a greedy and arrogant oligarchy of rich people who are trying to cling to their power and privilege with the backing of North American big business, including the maquiladora sector, textiles, U.S. and Canadian mining industries, the fast food industry, Burger King, Dunkin' Donuts, all these people are all there. So with the backing of North American big business and their governments. So Zelaya came into power in 2006 when the crisis of neoliberalism was already evident in Latin America generally, as were the beginnings of an alternative sort of center-left developmental model pursued most vigorously by Venezuela under President Hugo Chavez. Zelaya therefore implemented a series of important reforms, some of which were already mentioned, including entering Honduras into the Venezuela-led ALBA economic bloc, pushing through the aforementioned Citizen Participation Law, and one of the most important things, increasing the minimum wage by 60%, which made Honduras from one of the most low-wage economies in Central America to one of the higher. So Zelaya's reforms really began to grate on an oligarchy that was accustomed to just doing whatever it wanted. And it's kind of, I'll just tell one story because Hondurans really like to sort of amuse foreigners with these sort of jaw-dropping tales of how greedy their rulers are. So just one story, they told us how the rich in Honduras generally actually refuse to pay their electricity bills ever. So if for their homes or for their business, it doesn't matter. And some like really big, robber barons or whatever hadn't paid any electricity bills for like 10 years. So by 2007, the state electricity company ENEE was actually functionally bankrupt due to massive non-payment by the rich. So Zelaya actually initiated something called Operation Scissors, where they literally went out with big scissors and cut the power lines to like mansions and resorts, and just said, if you don't pay, then you don't get energy. So it was pretty funny and effective. They even did get some money out of it. However, the oligarchs were actually able to use their base in the Congress and in the state bureaucracy to halt Operation Scissors. And then in the next year, ENEE, the electricity company, was forced to actually resort to large rate hikes in order to try and recover some of the money they were just losing from the rich not paying. So this is the kind of thing that ordinary Hondurans actually have to put up with from the rich. And so as I think the introduction made clear, Zelaya is not really he's not really a leftist or anything like that, but he has tried to reduce sort of the vampirism of the rich for broader developmentalist goals, and that's what really brought about the coup. But by the same token, because people are so fed up with what they have to put up with from their ruling class, the democratic resistance against this coup is extremely strong. And I can tell you with total confidence that the majority of the population in Honduras actually supports the resistance, including almost all the working class and almost all the peasantry. And I think this is really obvious. I mean, it's not obvious in the U.S. because you're lied to about it. But if you go around, it's obvious if you talk to people on the streets. If you look at like the graffiti on every wall, I mean, there's universal graffiti all over the place, which is anti-coup. If you note the size and the frequency of anti-coup mobilizations, I think now is the 53rd or 56th or something like day of mobilization. Continuous means every single day people are out marching in the street in big numbers, thousands of people at least. So if you pay attention to that, if you pay attention to what workers will watch on TV when they get to choose the channel, there's a couple channels which are anti-golpista, and that's the ones people watch, and so on. So there's a lot of evidence for it. This is a movement that's supported by the majority. And one thing that honestly is very interesting to try and comprehend, because I've never sort of seen it myself, is what happens when real masses of people, that is hundreds of thousands or millions of people, actually enter political life and give support to a revolutionary movement. And I've read about such things in books or whatever, but to experience is something quite different. And one thing that I think really hit me is how important actually the passive acquiescence of people is for the political rules of elites. That is, even if you're fed up or even if you're mad at what happens to you in the society, we sort of go along with it in some way. And when big masses of people, the majority actually don't tolerate that anymore, it becomes very, very difficult to rule, even if the elites still have the armed forces, the army, and blah, 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 and the rest of it. So the Honduran coup regime, because of the resistance, has been forced to really rule by brute force. But for precisely that reason, the regime has never consolidated politically. So they actually seem very fragile. I mean, they're crazy. They act very arrogantly. But at the core of it, you can tell they're sort of underconfident, unstable, very fragile, and very, very, very stupid.
In the question and answer period, Joseph noted a connection between Honduran workers and the issue of Palestine.
Side asked about there was a, I don't think it was a banner, but it was a sign at Via Campesina about with something written in Arabic. I think it said the world economy depends on our labor or something like that. It's interesting, like the one thing that's very, very striking, particularly about the trade unions, particularly the trade union where a lot of stuff happened, which was Stibis, which is the beverage workers union. I don't know if I had the thing up there, but like there's a conference room at Stibis, and they had a bunch of posters on the wall, and there's one poster that's kind of it's a good militant trade union poster about why you need a contract. It's very good. The rest of the posters are all political posters, so it's like Che Guevara, Zapata, guerrilla fighters, and most striking, like Free Palestine and U.S. out of Iraq. So there's a much and there was actually Free Palestine graffiti on the walls, along with anti-golpista stuff. So there's a very different conception, particularly of trade unionism in Honduras, at least amongst the best unions, which is actually that the trade unions aren't just about fighting for your members, but are about trying to lead a broader struggle in society for democracy, and that's acted out, and it means people make political connections much more easily. So yeah, it actually struck me too, because I've done Palestine solidarity work for a while, and I was very struck and impressed by that people made that connection organically.